कोई भी वाकिफ ना था मुझसे ना मेरा मोतक़िद लेकिन अब देखो के चर्चा किस कदर
Obedience and sincere effort. This is the hallmark of spiritual communities. This is how they are nurtured and grow beyond all boundaries.
Either you'll be detained or you will have to go back on the ship, in the same ship that you arrived. And he very courageously responded. He says, I am not going back, for my Khalifa has sent me to go to the United States and preach the message of Islam.
Let us take a brief look upon the pages of history and unfold a sparkling example of a righteous, brave, and humble servant who set forth upon a grand mission with sincere obedience to his Khalifa.
He was called by the Khalifa of the time to say, I'm sending you to America.
Manifesting the divinely guided vision of Khilafat and the eternal successes and blessings attached with it.
During the time of the promised Messiah ﷺ, there was a man named Charles Seawright, who was an Australian, who traveled all the way. In his travels or his meeting with the promised Messiah ﷺ is safeguarded in Malfuzat, in which he travels to Qadian, and he was already a Muslim when he was in Australia. He in fact wanted to learn more about Islam and he wasn't sure where to go, and so somebody had advised him that he should travel to India. And when he arrived in India, he traveled throughout India and eventually arrived in Lahore. And in Lahore, somebody told him that there's in fact somebody who claims to be the promised Messiah, and he's in Qadian. And then he proceeded to reach Qadian, and on that very day, he had the good fortune of meeting the promised Messiah ﷺ. And during this mulaqat, or this meeting, the promised Messiah ﷺ gives him a name. He says, your name should be Muhammad Abdul Haq. And he takes his name and he takes it as his new identity. And he cherishes it. And this was 1903. 3 years later, he cannot forget that mulaqat with the promised Messiah ﷺ, that meeting with the promised Messiah ﷺ. So much so that in the Review of Religions he writes that I profess I am a member of Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat. And I'm not just a member by any, I am dedicated. He is my master, the promised Messiah ﷺ, and I miss him. And so in his very life, Hazrat Muhammad Abdul Haq Raziyallahu anhu became the very first Sahabi that we know of that was living in the United States. So from day one, the promised Messiah ﷺ himself had a direct focus of tabligh in the United States. And of course, this translated in his khulafa as well.
America was chosen not by us, but it was chosen automatically by a sign of God, which was manifested in Zion, Illinois. When a person made a claim that he is the Elijah, and he abused Holy Prophet ﷺ and tried to challenge Hazrat Masih Maud. So it began during the time of Huzur al-Islam. So it is by choice, not by our choice, but by God's plan. Then organizational wise, in 1920, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih II Radhiyallahu chose America for sending a missionary, and guess what? Mufti Muhammad Sadiq Sahab, who had a long conversation with John Alexander Dowie and correspondence through newspapers and letters, he was chosen to come here, and he arrived from London in 1920 to America.
It was Jalsa 1919 when Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Sani, may Allah rest his blessed soul, made an extraordinary announcement at Jalsa Salana in December 1919, where he essentially said, we are going to send our humble Darvish, Dr. Mufti Muhammad Sadiq, to the United States.
The global vision of Huzur Radhiyallahu Anhu was that it is to expand the religion of Islam, Ahmadiyyat, throughout the world.
And what do we see? The very first element was that Hazrat Mufti Muhammad Sallallahu was sent first to the United Kingdom. And when he was sent was in the heat of the battle of World War I. As you can imagine, many people began to, share their concerns with Hazrat Muslim that maybe you should not send him. Maybe it's dangerous. Maybe, he may not survive, and so on and so forth. And so when people first approached Hazrat Mufti Sahib, he said, what is the worst that will happen? Either I'm killed and, and so be it. My life will have succeeded. And if other case would be that I'm as a prisoner of war, then I will continue to preach there. What loss will I have? Again, that is a beautiful way of seeing it.
तो चल पड़े फिर तीर क्या तलवार क्या फिर तीर.
When people came to Hazrat Muslim, they said, look, we're afraid if you're sending him to London or England in the heat of this battle, what if he has destroyed many of the ships that are going to United Kingdom from here are being destroyed on the route there? And as a Muslim said in a very beautiful way, although the wheat grains are grinding in the millstone, there are some grains that are saved, even after the grinding process. Mufti Sahib is one of those who will be saved. And then he says, nothing will happen to him.
ये जानो मालो आबरू हाजिर है तेरी राह में. ये जानो मालो आबरू हाजिर है तेरी राह में.
Now, of course, Mufti Sahib Razida himself writes what happens next. He says many ships were being destroyed in front of us, behind us. Everybody on the ship became restless. He says at that moment I had a vision. And in the vision, Allah is operating the ship. And an angel says to me in English, Sadiq, rest assured, this steamer will arrive safe. Sadiq, rest assured, this steamer will arrive safe. This is exactly what had happened. He had arrived in the United Kingdom safely in 1917 and then departed for the United States in 1920.
So when he gets to the work, first of all, we have to keep in mind two things about Dr. Mufti Muhammad Sadiq. May Allah be pleased with him. First, he was taught and he was trained by the promised Messiah himself. So he was an extraordinary, intelligent, bright individual. So in other words, whenever there were English guests, English correspondents, it was Mufti Sahib who responded to that. Now, when you look that now that he's being dispatched to the United States, his work did not begin when he reached New York. His work began on the ship. His work began when he was in prison those 2 months.
What happens? When he arrives in the United States, immediately as he is disembarking the ship after a very long voyage, the immigration officers stop him. And they said, what are you planning to do here? He said, I'll be a preacher. And this is how they flag him immediately. They do not let him disembark that ship in Philadelphia. And he very courageously responded. Many souls are waiting for my arrival to be guided on the right path. Of course, the immigration officers didn't understand. They were shocked and they said, look, we have no other option. So then they detained him in New Jersey. And he remained there for 7 weeks while his decision was going to be made from Washington, D.C. During this time, of course, Hazrat Mufti Sahab Raziyallahu anhu began working in the prisons, began sharing his message to those inmates who were with him. But at the same time, the message reached as far as Qadian. And his master, Hazrat al-Muslim Raziyallahu anhu, hearing this news, said in a very powerful way, America claims to be a powerful country, for she has only battled with worldly kingdoms and has not confronted a spiritual kingdom yet. If America confronts our kingdom, she will never be able to defeat us, because God is on our side.
बाजी लगे जब इश्क की फिर जीत क्या और हार क्या, फिर जीत क्या और हार क्या, तूफान से जब टकरा गए.
So Mufti Sahib had a spiritual confidence from the Khalifa of the time. Secondly, Mufti Sahib looked at a problem, he looked at it, because he was taught and trained by the promised Messiah, he knew all of the arguments. Mufti Sahib could see clearly that the one thing that everybody is looking for is that connection with Almighty God. And this was not the charge of Marcus Garvey. So when he filled that particular thing in, along with talking about the other disparities, as Marcus Garvey was talking about, many of the followers and people associated with Marcus Garvey began to become attracted to this guy from India named Mufti Muhammad Sadiq, and this sweet, wonderful message of brotherhood and love called Islam and Ahmadiyya.
It is truly amazing to see the sacrifices of those early pioneer Muslims. You know, Hazrat Mufti Muhammad Sadiq would write, he would say that this quarter, 100 or so people have joined Islam and Ahmadiyyat. And he said, and among them, 10, I myself was, worked on and was able to help them enter the fold of Islam and Ahmadiyyat. He said, but the rest 90 were as a result of these 4 or 5 Da'i ilallah, or at that time they were missionaries, or whatever he referred to them as, but they were essentially very dedicated Ahmadis. And they established the mission, or they established that love for Islam and Ahmadiyyat in the hearts of fellow Americans. Now what's amazing is that once they would join, it wasn't enough that they joined. They would start writing articles for the Muslim Sunrise. They would contribute literary works. They would write poems. They would translate the poems of the promised Messiah with the help of Hazrat Mufti Muhammad Sahib. They would read the Muslim Sunrise regularly. And on top of all of that, they would give financial contributions themselves.
Now today has left when this verse of Holy Quran of Surah Zuha, وَلَلْ آخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنَ الْأُولَىٰ, your next day would be more advanced and better than the day just preceded. So Jamaat India is, mashallah, enjoying that growth day by day.
फिर आर क्या और पार क्या, जब चल पड़े तो चल पड़े, फिर तीर क्या तलवार क्या, फिर तीर क्या तलवार क्या, फिर तीर क्या तलवार क्या.